The line at the Maple Street Market stretched back past the bread shelves on a Tuesday evening, and a woman named Dana stood at register 4 watching a young mother fall apart in slow motion. The mother had 2 children hanging off the cart, a gallon of milk sweating in her hands, and a face that had given up trying to hide how tired it was. Behind her, 11 people waited with their baskets and their watches and their patience worn thin. Dana did not know that the woman in front of her at that moment would change the shape of her whole year. She did not know that one small mercy, the kind she gave without thinking, the kind nobody ever wrote down anywhere, was about to come back to her and to every person standing in that store in a way none of them could have imagined. All Dana saw was a mother about to cry over a carton of eggs, and she did the only thing that felt right. She told the people behind to give her a second, and she waved the young mother forward and rang her up, gentle and slow. And when the card came back, declined the first time, she said, "Try it again." "Honey! The machine does that." And it went through on the second swipe, though Dana was fairly sure it was her own employee discount code she had quietly punched in to make the difference. The mother whispered a thank you so soft it almost did not land. Then she was gone into the parking lot with her kids and her milk, and Dana turned back to the line and said, "All right, who's next?" like nothing at all had happened. Stay with me, because what that tired young mother did 3 weeks later is the part nobody in that store ever forgot. Dana was 41 years old, and she had stood behind a register for 9 of those years. She knew the rhythm of the place the way some people know a hymn. The beep of the scanner, the hiss of the conveyor belt, the particular complaint of the old freezer in aisle 6 that nobody ever fixed. She knew the regulars by the things they bought. The man who came in every Friday for 1 steak and a lottery ticket, who never won and never stopped buying, and who told Dana every week that this was the one. He could feel it. The grandmother who counted out coins from a knotted handkerchief and apologized every single time for taking so long, though Dana never once minded, who bought the same 6 things every Wednesday: tea and bread and a tin of soup and a small bag of the hard candies she said were for her grandson, though Dana had never seen a grandson. The 2 boys who came in after school and stood at the candy rack, doing the math out loud on what their pooled change could buy, and who Dana sometimes let walk out a dime short without saying anything. She knew the woman who only ever shopped late after 9, because she did not want to be seen, and Dana had learned not to ask. She knew them all, and they knew her, the way you come to know a face you see in the same window at the same hour for years, and that knowing was a kind of wealth Dana had, the only kind she had, and she did not undervalue it. Dana had a daughter of her own, a girl named Joy, who was 11, and who waited for her in the break room after school, doing homework under the buzzing light because there was nobody at home to wait with. Dana's husband had left 4 years back, left in the plain, quiet way that men sometimes leave, with a note and a half-empty closet. And since then it had been Dana and Joy, and the rent that climbed a little every spring. She made $12.40 an hour. She counted it in her head on the bus home every night, the way some people pray. The number lived behind her eyes. She knew it after taxes, after the part that went to the bus pass, after the part that went to the phone she kept only so the school could reach her. There was never quite enough. There was the rent, $480 a month for 2 rooms and a kitchenette, with a window that looked at a brick wall, and the medicine for Joy's asthma that ran $31 even with the discount card, and the electric bill that came in a red envelope twice last winter. Dana had a system for the red envelopes. She paid the half that kept the lights on, and she carried the rest to the next month, and she never let Joy see which envelope was which. On the bus, she would press her forehead to the cold glass and run the figures in order: rent first, then the medicine, then the fare, then the food, and most nights the food was the number that had to bend, because it was the only one that would. She had learned to make a chicken last 5 days. She had learned which day-old bread the bakery shelf put out at a markdown, and what hour they put it there. She did not think of any of this as suffering. She thought of it as arithmetic, and she was good at it. And being good at a hard thing is its own small dignity, even when nobody else can see it. Dana did not complain about it out loud. Not to her co-workers, not to her sister on the phone, not to anyone. She just worked. She came in early, and she stayed late, and she learned every register. And she never once let a customer feel like they were a burden, because she knew what it was to feel like a burden, and she had decided a long time ago she would not pass that feeling on. The young mother at Register 4 had worn that exact look, the look of someone certain she was a problem the world wished would go away. Dana had recognized it the way you recognize your own face in a dark window. That was the whole reason she waved her up. There was nothing more to it than that. She did not even tell anyone she had done it. She finished her shift, found Joy in the break room asleep over a math worksheet, and took her daughter home on the 7:40 bus through the rain. Now, here is the thing Dana did not know. The thing nobody behind that register could have guessed. The young mother she had helped was not a stranger passing through. Her name was Renee. And 3 years earlier, Renee had been the kind of broke that does not have a bottom. She had slept in a car with a newborn for 9 nights one February. The heater run into 10-minute bursts to save the gas. The baby tucked inside her own coat against her chest, so the warmth would not leave either of them. She remembered the sound the engine made when it would not turn over on the coldest of those mornings, and the way she had talked to it out loud, low and steady, the way you talk to a thing whose answer you cannot survive. She had sold her own wedding ring at a pawn shop for $40, a thin gold band with no stone in it, and the man behind the glass had not looked up from his loop when he slid the bills under the grate, and she had taken the $40 and used it to buy formula and a quarter tank of gas, and a single hot meal she ate in the parking lot with the baby asleep beside her. She had counted that $40 the same way Dana counted her hours, splitting it into what had to be and what could wait. And the woman she had become since then, the woman with 2 children and a sweating gallon of milk and a card that declined, was not the truth of her life anymore. It was a memory she had walked into the market, wearing like an old coat she could not figure out how to take off. Because Ozzy was not poor anymore. Renee had married in the years between, a quiet man named Marcus who had built something out of nothing, a regional chain of hardware and supply stores that started as one storefront and became 40 across 3 states. Marcus was not a man the magazines wrote about. He drove an old truck, and he wore the same brown jacket for a decade. The company he and Renee had built together was worth more than most people in that town would ever count. And Renee, the mother who had looked like she was about to cry over eggs, sat on its board and signed checks that could have bought the Maple Street market outright. She had not been performing poverty at Register 4. She had simply been having one of those days where the weight of every old fear comes back at once, the card she grabbed by mistake from the wrong slot of her wallet, the children fussing, the rain coming, the long ego version of herself rising up to remind her how close she had once stood to the edge. And in that exact moment, when she felt 9 years old and $40 poor and entirely invisible, the cashier had looked at her like she was a person and quietly carried her over the gap. Renee got into her car in the parking lot, and she did not start the engine for a long time. She sat there with the milk on the seat and her children in the back, and she cried. Not because anything was wrong, but because something had been right when she had braced herself for it to be cruel. She had walked into that store wearing her oldest fear, and a stranger had met it with grace and asked for nothing. Have you ever had someone be kind to you on a day you could not have survived their unkindness? Renee had. She would not forget it. What she did with it is the rest of this story. Renee did not know the cashier's name that night. She had been too wrung out to read the badge. So the next morning she called the Maple Street market and asked the manager, a careful man named Wendell, who had run the store for 16 years, whether he could tell her the name of the woman who worked Register 4 on Tuesday evenings. Wendell, who had learned long ago to be suspicious of any call that started this way, asked her why she wanted to know. He thought maybe there had been a complaint. He thought maybe somebody was about to make trouble for one of his people. And Wendell protected his people the way a man protects the only thing he has built. He had buried a wife 2 winters back, and his children lived in other states, and the store was, if he was honest, the thing he loved most steadily in the world, and the people who ran his registers were closer to family than he would ever say out loud. So he held the phone a beat and he said, "Careful, who is this, and what is this about?" Renee told him there was no trouble. She told him the cashier had done something kind for her, and she only wanted to thank her properly. Wendell, still cautious, said her name was Dana, and that she was one of the best he had, the kind who never called in, the kind who stayed late without being asked, and never wrote it on her hours. He said whatever Renee was planning, Dana would not want a fuss, that she was the sort who went red if you so much as wished her a happy birthday. Over the intercom, Renee said she understood. She said she understood better than he knew. She thanked him and hung up and sat at her kitchen table with a pen and a yellow pad, and she began to write down numbers, the way her husband Marcus had taught her to do when an idea was too big to hold in your head. She wrote down what she remembered of her 9 nights in the car. She wrote down the $40 and the pawned ring. She wrote down the formula and the quarter tank of gas. And then she wrote down a single sentence at the bottom of the page, underlined it twice, and called Marcus into the kitchen to read it. He read it standing behind her chair with his hand on her shoulder. He read it twice. Then he said, "All right, let's do it right." Across town, Dana worked her Wednesday shift and her Thursday shift and knew nothing. She did not connect the young mother to anything. She had helped 100 tired people over the years and forgotten most of them by the next register, not out of coldness, but out of the plain arithmetic of a life with no room left over. On Thursday, her landlord left a notice taped to her apartment door. The rent was going up $90 a month starting in May, and there was a line at the bottom that said tenants unable to meet the new rate should make arrangements to vacate by the 1st. Dana stood in her hallway and read it under the buzzing light, the same kind of buzzing light Joy did her homework under, and she did the math she always did, and the math did not work. $90 a month was a shift and a half she did not have. It was the brand name inhaler she had been promising herself she would buy. It was the difference she had no place to find. She read the notice 3 times standing there, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something survivable if she gave them another chance, and they did not. She folded the notice into quarters and put it in her coat pocket, and she did not tell Joy. She made dinner that night the same as always, rice and the last of the chicken, and she asked Joy about her spelling test, and she laughed at the thing Joy said about her teacher, and the whole time the folded paper sat in her coat by the door, like a stone she would have to pick up again later. That night she lay awake counting the rent and the medicine and the bus fare, and the new $90 that had no place to come from, and somewhere past 2 in the morning she let herself cry exactly once, quietly into the pillow, so her daughter in the next room would not hear. Then she got up at 6 and made Joy's lunch and went to work, because that is what she did, because the world did not stop asking, just because you had run out of answers. What Dana did not know was that 90 miles of phone calls had already begun to move on her behalf. Renee had not written a check and mailed it. That was not the idea, and it was not big enough for what she felt she owed. She wanted Dana to be seen all of her, the 9 years and the $12 an hour, and the daughter under the buzzing light. And she wanted it done in front of the very people who had stood in that line and rolled their eyes when one tired mother got waved to the front. She called Wendell back. She told him who she was, all of it, the company and the 40 stores and the board she sat on. And Wendell sat down hard in his office chair, because the woman he had been cautious with 2 days earlier could have bought his store and his house and his car without noticing. Renee told him her plan. She told him it would take a Saturday, and his cooperation and his absolute silence, because if Dana caught wind of it she would refuse, and Renee knew that the way she knew her own name, Wendell listened. When she finished, the careful man who protected his people said the first warm thing he had said to a stranger in years. He said, "Dana deserves this, and I will keep it quiet if it kills me." Marcus, meanwhile, had pulled the records of the Maple Street Market itself, the way a man in his business could. It was a small independent store, family-owned, hanging on by a thread the way small markets did, squeezed between the big chains and the rising cost of everything. He read the numbers the way he read everything, slowly, twice, without expression, and what they told him was a familiar story. The family that owned it was old and tired, and had been quietly looking for a buyer for 2 years. The margins had thinned to almost nothing. One bad season and the doors would close, and the corner where the grandmother counted her coins would become a parking lot, or a chain pharmacy, or nothing at all. Marcus knew that story, because he had lived the other side of it, had watched stores like this one vanish from towns like the one he grew up in, and had built his whole company partly out of a stubborn refusal to be the thing that killed them. He made a note of it. He filed it away. He did not say anything yet, not even to Renee, because some ideas you let grow in the dark before you bring them into the light. He just wrote the name of the store on his yellow pad, the same yellow pad his wife had used, and underneath it he wrote a number, and underneath he wrote a second line that only he understood. And he looked at the page for a long time, longer than he had looked at any page in a year. The Saturday they chose was the first Saturday in May, the busiest day of the month, the day the store filled up wall to wall with people stretching their dollars. Wendell put Dana on Register 4, where it had all started, and he told her only that a vendor was coming to do a promotion, nothing she needed to worry about. Dana believed him, because she had no reason not to. She tied her apron and clipped on her badge and started her shift like any other, scanning and bagging and saying "have a good one" to every face that passed, while across the parking lot 2 trucks she did not notice pulled up and began very quietly to unload. By 10 in the morning the store was packed. By 10:15 a woman Dana half recognized came through the automatic doors with 2 children and walked straight to Register 4, and it took Dana a full 3 seconds to place her. The young mother, the milk, the card that declined. The woman looked different today, steer. She wore a plain coat and plain shoes, and there was nothing about her that said money. But there was something in the way she carried herself, something that had not been there 3 weeks before, the look of a person who had decided something and come to do it. Renee smiled at her and said, "Do you remember me?" And Dana, who remembered everyone's kindness and none of her own, said she was sorry she helped a lot of folks, and she hoped that day had turned out all right. Renee said it had. Renee said it had turned out better than all right, and her voice caught a little on the words, and then she did something strange. She turned around to face the long line and the crowded aisles, and she raised her voice, not harsh, but clear enough to carry, and she asked everyone in the store if they could give her 1 minute of their time. The scanners went quiet. People looked up from their carts, and Renee began to talk. She told them, plainly, without any performance in it, that 3 years ago she had slept in a car with her baby for 9 nights in the cold. She told them about the ring she had pawned for $40, and the formula, and the quarter tank of gas. She told them she knew exactly what it was to stand in a checkout line praying the card would go through, and exactly what it was to feel the whole world behind you, wishing you would hurry up and disappear. The store had gone fully silent now. Joy, who had come in that Saturday to sit in the break room, had drifted out to the edge of the crowd and stood watching her mother's face, not understanding yet, only feeling that something enormous was about to happen. Renee pointed gently at Dana, who had gone red and still behind the register, and she said, "3 weeks ago this woman waved me to the front of this line when I was falling apart, and she covered the difference on my bill with what I am fairly sure was her own discount, and she never told a soul, and she asked me for nothing. They let that sit." Then she said the thing she had underlined twice on the yellow pad in her kitchen. She said, "Kindness like that is not small. It only looks small to people who have never needed it." Dana's hands had come up to her mouth. She was shaking her head, the way people do when the attention is too much, when they would give anything to climb back in to the safe grey quiet of being unseen. Renee, though, was not finished, and neither was the morning. The doors opened again and Marcus came in, and behind him came people carrying things, and the things they carried were for everyone. Renee had not come back to thank one cashier with one envelope. She had come back to turn that single act of grace into something the whole store could feel, because she believed, the way she had written it down, that kindness multiplies or it dies, and she had decided it would multiply. The first thing they did was simple, and it broke the room open. Every single person standing in line that morning, every cart, every basket, had their groceries paid in full. Marcus and Renee had arranged it with Wendell before the doors opened, and now, register by register, the totals were zeroed out. And a man buying diapers, and a woman buying her week's worth of canned soup, and a teenager buying a single birthday cake, for someone all heard the same words: "Your total is taken care of today. Please go in peace." The sound that went through the store was not a cheer. It was something quieter and bigger than a cheer. It was the sound of a room full of people who were used to bracing themselves, suddenly not having to. An old man near the back put his hand over his eyes. A young couple looked at each other and laughed and then stopped laughing because they were crying. A woman in scrubs who had clearly come straight off a night shift, still wearing her hospital badge, stood at register 1 with a basket of cereal and bananas and stared at the screen that now read 0, and she pressed her lips together and nodded slowly to herself, as if something she had stopped believing in had just been quietly handed back. A man, 2 carts down, buying diapers in the biggest box the store sold, set the box on the belt and then turned away and faced the freezer doors for a moment so nobody would see his face. The grandmother with the knotted handkerchief, the one who always apologized for counting her coins, stood at register 2 with her coins still in her fist and did not know what to do with them. And Dana, watching from register 4, watched the old woman's face and felt her own heart come apart, because she had rung up those coins 100 times and never once let the woman feel slow. The groceries, though, were only the beginning, and they were not even the real gift, because Renee had understood from the start that paying for one Saturday of food was a kindness that would be gone by the next Saturday. What she wanted to leave behind was something that did not run out, so she turned back to Dana, and her voice changed, went softer, went down to just the 2 of them even in that crowded room. She said, "I asked your manager about you. I know you have been here 9 years. I know you make $12.40 an hour. I know you have a daughter named Joy who does her homework in the break room because there is nobody home to sit with her. Dana, I know about the notice on your door." Dana's face came up sharp at that, because she had told no one about the notice, not Wendell, not her sister, not Joy. She did not understand how this woman could possibly know. And Renee, watching the fear cross Dana's face, said quickly, "Your landlord and my husband happen to use the same property manager, and the moment I heard your name attached to a vacate notice, I knew the world had handed me the chance to do this exactly right." Then Marcus stepped forward, and he set an envelope on the conveyor belt of Register 4, the same belt where it had all started, and he slid it toward Dana the way you slide something you do not want to drop. Dana did not open it. She looked at it like it might come apart in her hands. Renee said, "Open it later when you are home with Joy. I will tell you, though, what is in it so you can breathe tonight. Your rent is paid for the next 2 years, at the new rate, ahead of time, so that the notice on your door means nothing now. And there is enough beyond that to stop you counting on the bus for a good long while." The store was crying openly now, strangers with their arms around strangers, and Joy had pushed to the front and was holding onto her mother's apron, looking up, finally beginning to understand. Dana could not speak. She had spent 9 years making sure no customer ever felt like a burden, and she had never once let herself imagine that the ledger ran both ways, that the quiet, faithful things you do when no one is watching might be exactly the things that come back to carry you. There was more. Renee had saved the largest thing for last, and it was the thing Marcus had been letting grow in the dark on his yellow pad. He cleared his throat. This plain man in his old brown jacket, who never spoke in public, and he told the store that he had spent the week buying the Maple Street Market from the tired old family that owned it. The store would not close. It would not be swallowed. It would stay exactly what it was. The corner where the grandmother counted her coins and the man bought his Friday steak, and the children hung off the carts. And then Marcus looked at Wendell, and he looked at Dana, and he said the company would be installing new management. and that he could think of no one who understood the soul of that store better than the woman who had spent 9 years making sure nobody who walked through its doors ever felt small. He offered Dana a position, salaried, with health insurance for her and for Joy's asthma medicine that came in the red-flagged envelopes, at a number that made Dana sit down hard on the little stool behind the register because her legs would not hold her. He told her she could say no. He told her she could think about it. Dana, with her daughter's hand in hers, and a store full of weeping strangers around her, and an envelope on the belt that erased 2 years of fear, looked at the young mother she had waved to the front of a line 3 weeks earlier, and finally understood what kindness she had set in motion without ever knowing. She did not say anything clever. She did not make a speech. She just put her free hand over Renee's hand on the count and said, "Thank you." The same 2 words the young mother had whispered to her so softly 3 weeks before that they had almost not landed. Only this time the whole store heard them. The Saturday ended the way the best days do, slowly, with people not wanting to leave. They lingered in the aisles, and they shook Marcus's hand, and they hugged Wendell, who had kept the secret until it nearly killed him. And many of them came through Register 4, just to put their hand for a moment over Dana's hand before they went, because they had watched something true happen, and they wanted to carry a little of it home. The grandmother with the knotted handkerchief was the last to come through. She still had her coins. She held them out to Dana, all of them, the whole sad small fortune from inside the handkerchief, and she said she wanted to give them to the next person who looked the way that young mother had looked. Dana folded the old woman's fingers back over the coins and told her to keep them ready, because there would always be a next person, and now this store would always be a place that waved them to the front. Renee heard that, and she wrote it down later on the yellow pad, under everything else, because she said that one line was the whole reason she had come back. The story did not end in the store. It went home with everyone who had been in it. Dana took the position. Of course she took it. She gave her notice on the register and put on the keys to the place a month later. And the first thing she did as manager was install a soft chair and a real lamp in the break room so that no child of any employee would ever again do their homework under a buzzing light. Joy picked the lamp. It had a yellow shade. Dana paid the rent 2 years ahead the way the envelope allowed. And then she did something she had not been able to do in 4 years, which was breathe without counting. She slept a full night. She bought Joy the inhaler with the brand name instead of the generic that worked half as well. And on the first Tuesday of every month, on the evening shift that nobody else wanted, Dana came down to the floor and worked Register 4 herself, on purpose, watching the line, because she had learned that the most important thing a person in charge of a store could do was keep her eyes on the face of whoever looked like they were about to cry over a carton of eggs. Renee came back too, not with cameras, not with crowds, just with her 2 children, every few weeks, to shop like anyone else and to sit a while in the break room with Dana over coffee in the soft chair under the yellow lamp. The 2 women had become, in the strange arithmetic of grace, something close to friends, the kind that only happens when one person sees another on the worst possible day and chooses tenderness. Renee told Dana once, with her coffee going cold in her hands and her youngest asleep against her shoulder, that the 9 nights in the car had nearly broken her into someone hard, that she had felt the hardness coming on like a frost, and that the only reason she had come out the other side, soft enough to help, was that strangers, here and there along the way, had refused to let her feel like a problem. A church lady who left a bag of groceries on the hood of the car without a word. A gas station clerk who waved off the difference when she came up short. Small things, things nobody wrote down. Dana told Renee that she had waved her to the front of that line for the simplest reason in the world, because Renee had worn the face of someone certain she was unwanted, and Dana had spent her whole life refusing to let anybody feel that in front of her if she could help it. "I know that face," Dana said, "because I have worn it." Renee said, "I know. That is why I came back." Neither of them said anything grand about it. They did not need to. The store ran on, and it ran differently now. Word got around the way word does. And the Maple Street Market became known, quietly in that part of town, as the store where they would wave you up if you were having a day, the store where the manager kept her eyes open, the store where a roomful of strangers had once watched their groceries get paid for by a woman who had slept in a car and remembered. People drove a little farther to shop there, not for the prices, for the feeling, for the chance, maybe, to be the next person the grandmother with the coins was waiting for. A year went by. On the first Saturday in May, exactly 1 year from the morning Renee came back, Dana stood at Register 4 at the end of a long shift and looked out over a store that was hers. To keep safe, and she reached into her apron pocket out of an old habit and felt for the notice she used to carry there, the folded notice that had once said vacate by the first. It was not there anymore. She had thrown it away months ago. Even so, her fingers had gone looking for it the way fingers go looking for an old pain, and finding nothing there, finding only the smooth, empty lining of the pocket, she understood at last, and all the way through, that the fear was gone, that it had been gone for a long time, and that it had been carried off not by luck, but by the plain returning weight of a kindness she had given. Without keeping any record of it, she thought about the young mother and the milk and the card that declined. She thought about how close she had come to just saying, "Card's no good, next please," the way a tired person at the end of a long line so easily could. She thought about how the whole rest of her life had turned quietly on the small choice to be gentle instead. Joy was in the break room down the hall, doing her homework in the soft chair under the yellow lamp, and Dana could see her through the open door, and the light fell warm across her daughter's face. Dana untied her apron. She turned off the conveyor belt at Register 4, the belt where an envelope had once slid toward her, and changed everything. And she stood a moment in the quiet of the closing store and let herself feel how full it was. Then she went down the hall to her daughter, and she put her hand on the soft yellow lamp, and she turned it off because Joy had finished, and it was time at last to go home.